Carnival Row is a neo-noir fantasy series that takes place in a Victorian-inspired city called the Burg. It stars Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne, as well as a diverse cast who portray both humans and mythological creatures. The show was developed by Renee Echevarria and Travis Beacham for Amazon Prime. It took over 3 years to complete this second season, which dropped its first 2 episodes on February 17th. They're titled Fight or Flight and New Dawn. On this podcast, we like to discuss the latest installments of a different series every show. Welcome to today's episode. So you watched the pilot, you watched the first 2 episodes of this season. I assume you're kind of confused because this is a complex show, but I was wondering if you know how it was made.
No, I have no idea.
So let's start off with a game called How Did This Get Made? Like the podcast, right?
Okay.
All right, so I have 4 choices here, and one of them is true. Ready? In 2013, Amazon began its pilot test program that allowed viewers to watch and vote for pilots for potential new shows. The Man in the High Castle was one of the first shows greenlit using this method, and in 2015, Carnival Row was the last, since the program actually concluded in 2018. That's the first option. The second one is that this was originally pitched as a soap opera, but in hell. Okay. The third one is originally the subject of a fierce bidding war as a movie spec script with Guillermo del Toro attached to direct. Legendary Studios ultimately won the rights, which was then acquired by Amazon.
All right.
And then the fourth one, C.S. Lewis of Narnia fame, wrote a novel called A Killing of Fairytown back in the 40s. The book has little to do with this show as there are no humans in it, but the detective is a mouse in the book, and none of the characters share the same names as their TV counterparts.
Okay.
So do you want me to run down them real quick again? We got the pilot test screening by Amazon that took place in like 2014, 2015. That's when it was originally greenlit. And the second option is that this was originally pitched as a soap opera in hell. The third one is that it was subject of a fierce bidding war with Guillermo del Toro originally attached. And the fourth one was C.S. Lewis wrote a book that this is based off.
I hope to get this right because I know that I've gotten them wrong, like in the past
No,
couple.
it's okay. Like,
I will go with the Guillermo del Toro one because this does seem like a show that he could easily make.
Well, not as a show. Originally, it was supposed to be a movie,
A movie,
right?
yeah, a movie as well. I'm just saying the source material follows a lot of his like actual work. So I'll go with Guillermo del Toro.
Him, along with a couple other notable directors, were pitched on this series, and he was attached to it at one time. That is correct.
Okay.
The one that I found interesting, though, is that The Man in the High Castle, the way that had been created, this feels very much like a series that, because it wouldn't be produced very many other places because of how strange it is.
Yeah, well, also the budget.
That maybe it was because of like potential fans wanted to see something like this made, but it wasn't. That's not how it was made. Beacham actually had been plotting this world out, one of the co-creators, since college. And so it was
since college.
Yeah, like
okay.
15 to 16 years he worked on it, and people would ask him about it, and he would say that he wasn't really confident that it would ever get made because of the world being so big and because TV was different at that time.
Of course,
but,
yeah. No, this definitely feels like a new age television. Like this could have been made 10 years ago.
It's a gritty fantasy series, right?
Yeah, I mean, it also is just action packed as well. You follow a ton of different characters. I mean, just to name a few, you have Vignette, Rycroft Phillips, Black Raven, Una, Jonah, Sophie, Millworthy, Imogen, Agrius, and again, those aren't even all the people that are in this show.
I didn't even bother listing the recurring cast because of how many regular cast there are. You said Imogen, Agrius, Ezra, Tourmaline. The names are very interesting as well.
Yeah, Tourmaline has her own storyline in this episode. She's like apparently about to get superpowers. I mean, this show just goes all over the place, but what I liked about it is that it's nicely structured. It never felt like it was too much information was being... Well, it felt like at points too much information was being thrown at you, but it was like easy to follow and it always kept my attention.
Give me a synopsis of maybe the show in general and then a synopsis of only these 2 episodes.
Okay, so there is a war about to break out between the Pact and the Fawn, and the Fawn are these people that are like fairies. I think that you can also throw in just kind of any type of mythical creatures.
Human-sized fairies.
Human-sized fairies. You also have people that have horns. I'm not really sure, but like werewolves as well. Just a ton of different mythical creatures, and then you have have some people like Rycroft Philostrate, the main character, as we said, Orlando Bloom, and he's one of those people that actually side with the Fawn. The Pact are these evil people. We have Jonah as an antagonist. Then we have Sophie, who's kind of controlling Jonah's actions. That's more this season. And yeah, the Fays are treated unfairly against normal everyday people. So the
Fae are definitely the pixies, and the Fawn are the ones with the big old horns?
Yeah, well, no, I think the Fawn are the pixies as well. The Pact is just the evil villains that want to just destroy like all of them. That's why the Fawn are living in these like very poor areas.
Well, I had read that there was like a very big division between the Fae and the ones with the horns. Like they did not get along, especially in the original part.
Possibly. I mean, like I said, I only saw the pilot for it.
There's a classist thing between the two.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I think goes throughout the whole entire series. But then in this first episode of season 2, we have Vignette. I think that this was probably last season. She joined a revolutionist group run by this guy named the Black Raven.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of double agents. Well, the main character is a double agent. He's an inspector, Rycroft Philostrate, because the Pack thinks that he's working for them, but really he is in love with Vignette. And I think that last season they got together, and so therefore he's fine with them.
Even in the pilot, which you watched, right? They already had an ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
And they were just like they were solving a murder or something, and that's when they first got back together.
Yes,
but
exactly.
even before that, they had been together.
And then you have Millworthy as well. He's trying to help aid the Fays, but he's a human, and Rycroft and him are kind of working together. Then we have Jonah, our evil character. Again, he secretly has his strings pulled by either his wife or his evil girlfriend Sophie, as they just keep on mistreating Fays. We even see a couple Fays in the first episode of this season get their heads completely decapitated. Like, he is just not wanting to give the Fays any room. He basically just wants to wipe them out in the end. And then, because of this train robbery that happens in the very beginning of the episode, there was a dead officer. This is more towards the end of the first episode, that the Pact kind of wants to investigate because he, again, was an officer of theirs. And they think that the Fays did it. And so they assign Rycroft Philostrate to like look into the murder. And of course, she's working with Vignette, and there's all these kind of different questions going on. All the while, Tourmaline, I believe Vignette's friend, is someone who gets weird visions, and like I said, might have superpowers. Her eyes are turning like blue, and
she's like prophetic visions, like she can see the future.
Yeah. Okay. And she like gets visions, and she's even seeing Rycroft like shoot a gun at certain points. Just a couple different things. And then Imogen and Augureus, this is the first time we see them in the first episode. It ends with them. They are on a ship. And right as they walk out, after they have a little talk, they see that a Pact blimp is on top of them, or an airship, and they're like, pull over immediately because they're just about to dock.
So if you were to summarize that into like one sentence, what would you say that this world is trying to do? Is it trying to represent like current issues in a mythological sense, or is it?
I mean, I would say that, but also I think that this is also
like an adventure.
This is also for just entertainment purposes.
Okay, but it doesn't seem like it's leading to one specific direction.
There's multiple different things that are going on.
Gotcha.
In fact, in the second episode, Rycroft
It's not like Lost where they're all trying to get off the island.
No, this is like you have a ton of different. It's almost like The Expanse, but I'd say even more complex in the sense of all of the characters being in different places.
Sure.
We even are apparently Absalom Breakspears. That was a person, I guess, from the first season. Is Rycroft Philostrate's? That's his father.
Okay.
And apparently, it's going to be a big deal because at this banquet filled with Pact members and huge ambassadors that are going to be there, he's going to reveal that to them. I didn't.
Okay, yes. I did read a little bit about this. So, how do you say his name? Philostrate, right?
Yeah, Philostrate.
Okay, so Orlando Bloom's character, he finds out at the end of last season or something that he is half Fae.
That makes a lot more sense now. Because this whole entire episode, they never like pointed it out. They never said why it was a big deal.
But if that gets out, then obviously it's a conflict of interest.
And that's why Vignette in this episode is so against it. Like, they're having an argument at the very beginning of the second episode, and I was like, what's going on here? But Rycroft, he's going to say at this banquet, again, filled with Pact members, just that he was Absalom Breakspear's son. And apparently Millworthy, again, one of the other humans who was kind of fighting along with the Fays, is really support of this. So that's one thing going on. Then we get a main storyline with Imogen and Agrius. We only got a scene with them in the first episode, but their storyline deals with that they are split up. There's a lot of like evil cops. There's one evil cop that I didn't get the name of. But Imogen, she's supposed to be royalty in the place where she's originally from, and she's taken to like a weird, strange house where there's a woman named Leonora. And then Agrius, he witnesses all of his captains on the ship being killed, and he's almost killed until someone steps in and it's like, no, you shouldn't kill him. Don't really understand what's going on there. And then but
how can you even enjoy the show if you're that confused? Like if obviously if you've seen the first full season, do you think that you would have been at least prepared for this?
Yeah, I think I would have. But it's always entertaining. That's the thing.
So it doesn't matter if you understand it. You just like the spectacle of it. What did you think of the way the mythical creatures looked and that they were represented?
So one big positive for this is that the show looks very realistic, and the cinematography and also just the makeup department for everybody, they looked real. Like in the first episode, I didn't even talk about this. It reminded me a lot of the Mandalorian season 2's opening, because Rycroft Billostrade, the first time we see him is he's in this wrestling ring with all these different fays around him, and they're all wanting him to die because they just see a human and they're like, no, like we absolutely want him to get.
It reminds me a little bit of like Warrior, because there was that downtown underground fighting ring that they had going on. And he's fighting for money here, right?
Right, yeah. Well, actually, that's what they think he's fighting for. But he has to fight this like huge troll. It's like 10 feet high. It reminded me almost.
Oh, he's done that since like Lord of the Rings.
Well, it reminded me a lot of almost, this is a strange comparison, but Batman, the Arkham games.
Oh.
Whenever Batman has to face these like huge creatures and these underground wrestling rings, and he's able to do so. And he's about to get, like, the owner of the ring is about to give him money, but instead Rycroft asked for one big favor.
And that favor was?
We don't know. He just needs it, apparently.
We don't know that until like throughout the second episode?
Yeah, I don't think that it's ever said.
Okay.
But
who was your favorite character? Was he your favorite character by the end
Probably,
of it?
Yeah. I hadn't seen Orlando Bloom in a long time, so seeing him just show up, not only in the first 2 episodes here, but also in the pilot, I was like, oh, okay, he's almost going back to his Pirates of the Caribbean route.
So comparing these first 2 episodes to the pilot, though, what was the main difference? Did you see a tonal difference? Did you see, like, did the visuals look different at all? Did the characters seem like they had changed very much?
I wouldn't say the characters had changed, but the arcs, kind of that you were talking about, the character arcs seemed completely different. Like the first episode, from what I remember in the pilot, and that one is a little bit more foggier, but I believe it's just like Rycroft, and he doesn't even know Vignette is alive.
Yeah.
And then like he
so
learns
you would say
about
that their
it.
romance has evolved.
Yeah. In fact, it recaps at the beginning of this episode, in the first episode in season 2. It was unlike Netflix where you couldn't just skip it. It was actually ingrained in the episode, but it was its own separate thing, and I was just seeing all these different plot points happen. Some of the episode 1 was mixed in there, but 8 episodes of plot, and I was just like, I was like, this show must have just so much lore behind it. I'll finish up with the second episode. So at the banquet, right before Rycroft says his truth, right before he's about to let out the truth, Black Raven and Vignette break in through the roof, and in front of everyone show this sick patient that we've seen, I think at least in the first episode, definitely in the second, named Una, just to show that the fairies, or the fawn, are being mistreated, and like all the pack members just can't look because they're like so sickened at what they see by Una. She's obviously very sick. She's very veiny. I believe she's Black Raven's love, like maybe wife, something like that.
Okay.
And what happens is, one of the police members takes out a gun and just shoots Una right there, and she ends up dead. I was a little surprised that the police officer was just gonna let the fawn, like Black Raven and Vignette, kind of run away, but that's what happens. Everyone scatters, and for the most part, also Imogen and Agrius are meet up again at the second episode. Apparently they're just gonna have to live with a different family. That's kind of where the episode ends. But overall, like I said, this was shot like a movie. It gets you most invested because it looks nice like that. And I was just like, yes, this is a show that I was not actually really expecting that much from. Didn't know what to expect, but what I saw, I was like, yes, they did a very good job. And I have multiple things that this is like, comparisons.
Okay, go for it.
So the lore in the show I can favorably compare to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, because it very much ropes you in.
How about The Witcher?
The Witcher, as I've only seen 1 episode of The Witcher, but from what I remember, yes, very much so. Also, oddly enough, the costumes and the way that they were dressed, the mysterious Benedict Society, which, if you remember,
Fancy.
Fancy, but obviously that's a kid's show. But just the way in which they dress, kind of very old timey, reminded me of that. Shadow and Bone as well. I only ever saw the first episode of that, but I know that deals with kind of war and warring factions, correct?
Sure, the folklore behind it. That makes a lot of sense. Also, like the Dickensian way that, like, what was it? The Irregulars? Did it also look like that a little bit?
Just I would say so. It's very gray. That's what like the overtone of this show is.
Did it remind you at all of like horror series that you've watched, like the Lovecraft County or Country, right? And then
not Lovecraft Country, The Walking Dead though, because they do show fawns. In fact, that's how the second episode ends. Some fawns that we got to know in the second episode have fawns. Fawns, I think.
Okay.
They have their head on pikes.
Oh.
And so, and the people that were decapitated in the first episode that Jonah kind of executed, they have their head on pikes as well. Obviously, that was very similar to the Walking Dead episode.
What about Wheel of Time?
Wheel of Time was my next similarity. It's very similar in tone. Very similar in tone. Brandon Sanderson could have ruined this, and I would have been surprised.
I should have added that as one of the things of how it got made. Yeah.
And it looks like a cross between his Dark Materials and The Witcher. That's why I have written down here. And then also, I guess threw in the fact that it does deal with kind of like politics a little bit. Them, District 9, District 13, Zootopia.
Yeah. What did you think of the parallels or mirrors that it held up to like social racism, immigration issues that we see today?
Again, it really was.
That's my most educational question to ask. But
seeing, I think,
was there anybody who was like, don't move here?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like that with the fawns. Like, the humans are represented, except for the main characters, Rycroft, are represented as, like, very bad people. They will just blame anything on the fawns. They don't want them moving anywhere. That's why they are in such poor districts. I see Vignette a lot of the time in the first two episodes just walking through this place, and it goes to show that where they're living with, the fawns they're just crowded. It's like, overpopulated there. People are bathing in the streets. Really disgusting. I thought that did a good job being able to kind of show those socio-political issues.
Okay, all right. The negative reviews for it, do you want to hear what those have said in the past?
Sure, yeah.
All right, they've blamed the pacing, the lack of focus. They've said there's been tone inconsistency, a balance of dark themes and romance and fantasy that just don't blend particularly well, that they have unexplored themes, that it lacks some of the nuance when it tried to go after things like racism or classism, and then it lacks some originality because of how much it was pulling from other folklore and stuff. Those were all the negative ones. It also has positive stuff that's been said of like having a good blend of genres, being ambitious, complex characters, and a huge world build that just came out of this one person's brain, as opposed to like just, as I was saying, they're borrowing.
Well, going back to the negative reviews that you were talking about, everything you said, except for maybe the socio-political like things that they were doing, I felt like that was more just that was more in the background than it is for a lot of different TV shows.
So you disagree with the negative reviews?
Wait, for the that most part. No, but all the other stuff that you mentioned, the
pacing
talking
and all
about, that is 100% on point.
So you do agree that
yes.
So you don't agree that it was too hard hitting on the racial or political issues, but you do find issues with the pacing.
Yeah, I mean, the show can have really boring parts, and it feels like it's a bit full of itself as well. It never slows down with any of the lingo or lore, and like I was talking about before, me not understanding season 1 was a huge difficult problem.
How about the beginning intro that it did, where it tried to give you a filler up?
I mean, that didn't do anything as well.
It was too confusing?
Yeah, and just multiple scenes of characters saying the same thing over and over again. Like I was saying, that Rycroft, when he's fighting with Vignette about that truth in the second episode, is just like that's almost every single scene.
So it's somehow repetitive, but at the same time, very confusing.
Yeah, and it feels like it's trying to be this grand story, but it's like really, when it comes down to it, it's just two warring factions building up for what I assume is going to be a fight later on in the season. It doesn't feel like it's actually anything too special there. So, but those are all my cons for the show. Overall, I do think that this show absolutely passes. Like, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10.
7.5.
It does, also another con a little bit, is the fact that it tries to be dark, like really dark in certain parts, but it's like, no, a 13-year-old...
So the tonal imbalance, you're going back to that.
A 13-year-old could watch this. It would be completely fine.
Well, the interesting thing is that they made the show in like 2017 or 2018. they wrapped in 2018, but it wasn't released until a year later. And then it took through a pandemic before they were ever able to release a second season. And that also took almost a year of development.
Right. I remember I was looking this up and I did see 2019, 2023.
Normally, I would blame you for not having watched the first season and then criticizing the show about it being too confusing or not understanding stuff. But because I feel like a lot of the fans who are jumping into this might not remember the details or might be vague because they... You know,
the recap feels like, it didn't feel like one of those recaps where you remember every single thing. It felt like it was there for people to be like, oh, I kind of remember that. I kind of remember this, all this different stuff. It didn't feel like it was truly like...
Yeah. It just seems weird that, like, originally when the show was shot, Orlando Bloom was 42 years old. Cara Delevingne was, like, mid-20s.
He doesn't look 42 in this.
Well, now he's, like, 46.
Wow.
That's the thing. It's only been in its second season, and he's aged 5 years. I don't know if that's apparent in the show at all.
Okay, so I remember on IMDb it says 2019 to 2023, and I took that, and I thought that I remember saying it on the poster as well, but is this the final season or no?
Yeah, the second season was confirmed, but then also restricted to this is going to be the end. So they've released the first 2 episodes and they'll continue. I think the first season was all released together, however. The story behind a lot of this stuff is pretty interesting. The Celtic mythology that Beecham took in, the fact that like Fey women have short hair as opposed to and then the men have long hair, and then that's kind of reversed in humanity. And he definitely put a lot into his thinking behind it. Decider said that you should definitely watch it if you liked season 1, which is the safest review I've ever heard. You can give something. If you already enjoyed the show, then yes, watch it.
Here's the thing. I can understand where they're coming from. I would not recommend just jumping into season 2. I would recommend if you like the show, I'd watch the full first season.
So will you ever go back and watch the first season?
Probably not, because I have so many other shows that I would watch, but maybe one day out.
Yeah. I was a little disappointed because when I first saw the cover for this, and I remember I watched the first 10, 20 minutes of the pilot when it came out 4 years ago. Don't ask me about it because all I remember was that there were fairies in it. But it became so apparent so quickly that it wasn't, even though it had the coolest special effects and the visuals and stuff, the story just didn't have the same sort of like Game of Thrones compact. It knew what its message was for those first few seasons. Like it felt like it was just going in every direction, and that maybe there's a murder that they're trying to solve, but but that there was just too much else going on.
I would agree with that. I would also kind of compare it to Wheel of Time. Like I felt the same way, where it was like.
But you liked Wheel of Time to the point where you were going to continue to watch it.
Yeah, but really, I felt that the Wheel of Time was unfocused, and I see the same unfocusedness in Carnival Row. Yeah, because it just feels like there's so many different storylines going on. In fact, Imogen and Agrias' storyline, like that one to me was the most boring, and they spent a long time on it in episode 2. Tourmaline, I mean, I assume that when she gets her powers or whatever it is, it's going to be interesting, but her scenes I feel like could be cut.
They have a huge cast, and these are like really talented actors, but maybe it comes down to like, do you care if anyone besides the main 2 characters die?
No, not really.
See, that might be the issue. Like most shows, especially fantasy shows, they work so hard on trying to get you to fall in love with the characters, and we have to give account that you didn't watch the first season. But again, it didn't seem like those from the first 2 episodes that you were like that indebted into these other people.
That's sold on it, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.